I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which I'm recording today and pay my respects to their elders past and present. I also acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands wherever you may be listening from and wherever my guests are joining from too. Sovereignty was never ceded. This was and always will be Aboriginal land. Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of Jenuine Conversations. So in today's episode, I'm chatting with the lovely Bella Barello, who is Head of Social Impact and Engagement at the Lote Agency. Bella works between the intersection of strategy, systems and storytelling, helping businesses turn big complex ideas into meaningful inclusive action. She spent over 15 years working across social impact, communications and leadership, and she's passionate about driving businesses for good. So in this chat, I wanted to unpack what inclusive strategy really looks like, how to avoid social washing, and why human-centered leadership matters more than ever, especially in these semi-dystopian, tech-saturated times that we're living in at the moment. So without further ado, let's get into it. Thank you so much for joining me today, Bella, and your fabulous pink glasses.
Thank you so much for having me. I feel like we're matching, which is awesome.
We are, yes, I love it. Print and pink. It's good. Awesome. Well, the first question I wanted to ask you was, early on in your career, you've started in more so traditional kind of marketing roles. I wanted to understand, what sparked the shift into social impact and engagement for you.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's a bit of a story, but I guess that's why we're here, to tell stories. So bear with me. But I decided with, it's actually a sales and marketing background that I have working in the property sector. And I decided I needed to just do something different. So I started a master's in communication. And in that course, I did a unit called Communication for Social Change. And it just really inspired me and I guess opened my eyes up to how communications can be used for something different, not just to sell, more properties and get more apartments in Melbourne built, but actually to create social change. So it was a really exciting sort of pivot, I guess you'd call it. And that's when I changed my master's to a master's majoring in communication for social change. And it made me leave the property sector for 7 years in my 20s and move across into for purpose.
Amazing. And I guess just sort of thinking off the top of my head, what are the major sort of differences, I guess, with sort of seeing, some of that sort of social impact and change you could do in real estate versus in, what you're doing now?
Yeah, so in marketing, you end up getting like a broad kind of view across an organization. So over the years, it started out as customer service actually for new homes. And then I moved into marketing and sales for developers. And then when I crossed the bridge over into for purpose, I ended up sort of being, doing internal marketing for people in culture or working with customer service teams on customer experiences or working with boards and CEOs on strategy. So it kind of gave me more of this big picture kind of view of how an organization runs. Anyone who's a marketer will be watching this going, yes, that's us, that's me. I think we get very proud of
absolutely.
skills. Yeah, but it just sort of gave me a different perspective. And I guess what I do now to explain it is I sort of use those skills for brand and stakeholder engagement and think about our purpose and impact for the organisation and how we can use that as a lever to get new business.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome.
As well as to do good things.
Yeah, definitely. And what are some main, I guess, sort of, impacts and changes that you've sort of seen throughout your sort of career where you've, sort of been in a business and then there's been this amazing tangible sort of result that's come out of the work that you've done?
Yes. Okay, cool. What a question. Well, when I started in the for-purpose sector, I didn't really know what to expect. I thought I was going to be working for World Vision. That's what I kind of saw as the big dream, working for a charity, making a difference. But when I sort of moved into social enterprise, it's when my whole perspective on what social good is shifted. And this is where the marketing angle comes back. But social impact and running a social enterprise is running a business in itself, it has responsibility to be a business and then give back to the community. So it's not a charity, it's actually needs business principles and strategic marketing plans and all of the above. So when I first really saw that in action would be at my time at Social Traders, which are the peak body for social enterprise. And I just understood that, hey, making a difference isn't just working at World Vision, which is a great thing to do, but it can actually be working with corporate businesses and helping them understand how they can do better with their supply chains, as an example. So for me, that was a really big systems level, like big picture kind of role that really made me, I guess, excited about how you can have a commercial mindset, but then use that to generate good stuff for the community.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's helpful having that sort of context, because I'm sure a lot of people would see, you know, a job title like yours and think, yeah, like charity, you know, World Vision as an example. But I think sort of coming from that commercial background and now stepping into this space, it makes so much sense, because at the end of the day, capitalism exists, we live in it. So having that commercially minded sort of background, but then, yeah, wanting to do something where, you know, there's some real impact and change that you can sort of make within your role, yeah, is incredible. So that's cool to have that context for sure.
Yeah, and look, some people still, like my sister still doesn't really, she's like, what is it again that you do? Like, but the model I like to talk about is the thank you brand, like the hand soaps that we use, you know, the brand, really big in Australia. And we all love that product because it looks good, right? And it smells good. It's like a really nice product. But then they actually donate 50% of their profits to developing countries. So it's just an example of where you're spending money, you're consuming, but behind it is this other purpose for good. But it's still a good product in itself. That's where my passion is.
Yeah, absolutely. That totally makes sense. And to touch on something, I guess, semi-personal, like in conversations we've had, you know, just sort of one-on-one, I know that you're a proud mum. In terms of the sort of scope, I guess, that you sort of come at, you know, being a mum, you know, working in social sort of impact, has that influenced, I guess, the way that you sort of go about doing your kind of day-to-day job?
It definitely has, but in a way that's unexpected. So I think before I became a parent, I was definitely like, this was my jam, and that's when I started my master's. But I got made redundant when I was on maternity leave, and that was a real kick in the guts. And that was when I was working for an impact organization. So it was a strange turning point for me. And I guess it made me realize, you know, we're not in this perfect bubble, and it still is a business, and, you know, money comes in and money comes out. But when I did find my next role, what I noticed was, and this sounds really weird, but I felt like I was even more productive than before. Now, I'm not saying people without children aren't productive. No, that's not what I'm saying. But like, I had a different sense of time and what I could achieve.
I can imagine.
Yeah, with multitasking. And I found I would like get to work and at 8:30 be like, let's go. And everyone else in the team was like, what? I haven't even had a coffee. And I'm like, coffee? I'm going to have my second coffee now. Like, it just gave me this different kind of weird force to just get on with it and get straight to the point. And I feel like, I know this is really cheesy and we throw this around a lot, but it definitely became a little bit of a superpower.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I don't think that's cheesy at all. It's good to have these superpowers and acknowledge them when you've got them, because I think unfortunately sometimes it can be seen as, you know, if you sort of, you know, step into, you know, being a parent, that's a massive commitment. If people are a bit closed-minded, they might go, oh, you know, your brain's sort of half at home, half at work and things like that, which I don't necessarily think is the case, as evident, you know, with yourself. But that can be, I guess, a bit of a risk that sort of comes up if, I don't know, someone's super old school or just closed-minded and, you know, sort of things like that within a business. Yeah.
Totally. And look, before I was a parent, I was a carer in my family for an adult. And if anything, it sounds weird, but that was more of a distraction. You know, and that was hard to explain. So I guess there's different layers to being a person and being a person with a job, and may not always be what you think.
Absolutely, yeah. We're like onions, as Shrek says. Yes, I made a Shrek reference. We've all got our layers, and we've all got our lives outside of work as well. And I think that sort of shapes, you know, the type of work that we are drawn to, and, you know, how we sort of perform in a role as well, for sure. Yeah. So in your opinion, what do you think, you know, businesses can sort of do, I guess, to support working parents specifically? Like you mentioned being made redundant during maternity leave, which I could imagine is incredibly sort of stressful. What do you think sort of real inclusion looks like in that sort of space?
Yeah, I feel like we've got a really long way to go. And it's not just employers that have a responsibility. Like the whole setup of school and kinder and childcare, it is all of the assumption that you're a nuclear family. One parent is the breadwinner, another parent is sitting around ready for pick up drop off. That's the way the whole infrastructure is built. And then you're supposed to find a way to navigate this workplace and go, okay, I'm going to find a job, but it won't matter to them if I do drop off at some point. And it's just this minefield. And I think the whole thing is outdated. And this is not just in parenting terms. There's a lot of systems that are outdated, but I think this one's really tangible and easy to see why. And there's a few things you can do. One, get lucky to find an employer that has amazing policies around flexibility, and like a needle in a haystack and the utopia employer. Or you can get lucky and find a manager who's just really supportive. But I would challenge employers out there to put their roles out as open to full-time or part-time, because then you're finding the right person. And you might find that the right person is a 9 to 5 needs to be at their desk, contributes wholeheartedly. You might find that the right person is someone who gives less time but more output. So I guess the approach is, it sounds a bit generic, but it is just being flexible and open to the right candidates and not necessarily looking for a pigeonhole kind of role.
Yeah, definitely. And it's surprising actually just the amount of, like job briefs that, we'll sort of get as recruiters. I don't think I've ever been approached for something where they've just said, yeah, it can be sort of open to part-time. That's always a big part of the conversation that we have is, what if we find someone that is an absolute gun? And, typically it does sort of come into the conversation, might be a parent of young children, could do this role part-time, do it around school pickup and things like that. So I feel, hopefully it doesn't sound too cheesy, but I'm proud that we push that conversation and we sort of have that conversation. But it's in the business's best benefit. You can get someone that, could be, super senior and have them sort of part-time. That's a big part of the conversations that we have, because you've got someone with a wealth of knowledge and, like you said, be able to sort of, do that output in half the time. But if you're sticking to this really rigid, kind of sort of way of doing things, it's not going to attract people. Two, it doesn't work for a lot of people. Like I think, and I'm just assuming here, but, our generation, I feel like a lot of it was latchkey parenting. I know I was pretty much raised by my grandmothers for a good chunk of time, and it's not that way anymore, which I think is fantastic. It's so great to see how hands-on parents are, and they should be able to do that, but also have their career. Like being a mum shouldn't mean that there's this, massive pause in your career, unless you want that pause to happen and you want to be a homemaker, and that's fine as well. So, yeah, it's definitely something that needs to be looked at quite heavily, I think. Yeah.
We need to make a lot of change, because there's women out there that are like, okay, I'm just going to get a job to pay for childcare so that I have a career, like the wheels are turning of a career, but I'm not making any money. Like that's wild.
Yeah.
So something's got to shift, and we've got to design the systems to be, even school care I was in Hong Kong earlier this year, and they run the school day 9 to 5 because as a society, they're like, oh, right, the parents work 9 to 5. Like there's just going to be changes, like this 1960s household with one parent going to work. Like that's not what's happening. And I find it really strange, actually, that nothing's shifted in that space. And I think it will. It's just going to take a bit of time.
Yeah, absolutely. Like COVID was a pretty horrific time, I would say, for most people. But I think one of the big benefits was seeing that sort of flexibility, whether it's remote or, hybrid and things like that. And at the end of the day, businesses are going to keep the best staff around if they're happy, if they're feeling appreciated, if they've got that sort of level of flexibility. Like if you're performing, why not sort of offer that, particularly, considering around people's sort of circumstances, parents or not, you never know what's going on in someone's life. But yeah, I think sometimes it can just be easy to put people in a bit of a box and go, oh, too hard. But it's quite a short-sighted sort of view, because a lot of really great people get missed out on that way.
Yeah, 100%. You've got to be looking for the fit, not necessarily the hours, for sure.
Definitely, for sure. And I wanted to bring up a bit of a cheeky question, if it's okay. When we first met each other, so Bella and I met at a networking event, and I introduced myself, said, "Hey, I work at Creative Natives. I'm here." And one of the first things Bella said is, "I hate recruiters, but I love what you guys do." So I thought it was hilarious because I completely get it. I get why recruiters have a bad rep. There's good reason for it. But I guess I wanted to sort of get, from your sort of perspective, and I'm interrupting myself, but totally we'll do topic of why recruiters have a bad rep and what we can do around that. But talking to someone, in the position that you're in at the moment and the expertise that you've had across the years, I guess, what are some things that you sort of think about that, recruiters can sort of do differently to lead with impact and inclusivity in our own sort of roles? And I guess, the output that we're sort of putting out there into, whatever industry we're sort of recruiting in, whether it's specialized like what we do at Creative Natives, promise this isn't a big plug, or, any other sort of recruitment industries, whether it's more corporate or what have you.
Yeah, I guess that's a really interesting question. I think recruiters, I don't hate all recruiters, by the way. I think a lot of us have had some weird experiences, especially when I was younger. And it's like a transactional experience where they see the employer as paying and the potential candidate as someone who they just need to shuffle along. But anyhow, I think what I find interesting about Creative Natives is you guys seem to talk about more broadly what's happening in industry, what's happening in the sector, what's happening for hiring teams, and provide like knowledge and insights and assets for that network rather than push a hard sell. And I think more, we don't want to talk about what more recruiters should do because then like they'll be stealing your secret sauce. But, I guess recruiters could take up a different responsibility on educating employers on what's changing and the needs of younger generations and what their expectations are, rather than it being a one-way street. Because I think, and I don't want to talk about, generation wars because that's boring, but younger people just won't put up with it and they're going to want something very different, and they're slowly trickling into the workplace. So I guess the best recruiters are the ones that are sort of rising above and creating industry, I guess, capacity or capability in those areas and shifting and navigating these flip-flopping conversations about having an office and working hybrid and all of that stuff. I think what I found interesting about Creative Natives, I've never even used your services or been a candidate myself, but I just find your story really interesting because you talk more broadly what's going on, and we're all sort of drawn to that because I think a lot of leaders are really looking for answers right now, and it's not that Ryan and yourself and the team are a crystal ball, but you're just publicly talking about that, like, hey, this is weird, what's changing, what's happening, and it's just really relevant and refreshing.
Absolutely, for sure. Because I think a number one sort of thing, I sort of typically get asked when I tell someone I'm a recruiter or at, networking events, like, oh, how's the market going? What, sort of trends are you noticing? And it's not something that we need to like harbor and sort of keep to ourselves. It's something where we can sort of educate people and inform people. And it's funny as well because we've got to manage that fine line of not lecturing businesses, I guess, sometimes when we're seeing something that isn't sort of quite working and could be done better, and also sort of helping candidates at the same time. Like I know for myself went into this because I do want to, have impact and be able to sort of help people. Can't help everyone, but you can sort of, do what you can to just sort of put the good word out there. So I think not in a religious sense, but yeah, that's a big part of what we're about. And it's interesting hearing your insights on that and your feedback on that as well, considering, I think we've all had a bad recruiter story in the past. Yeah.
I do, and I think I just get really drawn to brands that make sense. And I think like how I talked about the thank you group, I think what Creative Natives put out there, it just makes sense. It's just accessible and palatable and interesting. And I think the recruitment industry, like you're probably leading an overhaul, with your competitors and peers, like, oh, what are they doing? Because it's just, I'm such a fangirl, clearly.
And I appreciate it. I'll pass on the compliments to Ryan as well. Awesome. And my last sort of question would be, when I guess you sort of, look back on, where you sort of started on earlier in your career, do you think you would give any advice to your younger self as you, started off in property, which is very different? And I will cheekily say, real estate agents don't always have the best reputation either. So it's a very different, you definitely had a big sort of pivot in what you've done. But I found that really interesting that you found a way to sort of drive impact in that sort of industry as well. So we've just, Bella's just moved locations, just some tech issues. So we've got a new fanciful backdrop and we love it. And I'll just go into my final question with you, Bella. So I just wanted to ask, sort of upon reflection, having worked, starting off in, the property industry and things like that, I guess sort of sticking to that sort of trend of, recruiters not having the best rep, definitely there's not so much people in property, but, real estate agents and things like that. That's another industry that sometimes gets a bad rep. So for me, it was quite interesting sort of hearing about how you could find ways to lead impact within, property, where people do see that, as quite sort of transactional and, big apartment blocks being built all over Melbourne, all that sort of stuff. So when you sort of think back to, Bella back then, as cheesy as that sounds, what kind of advice or sort of insights would you give your younger self? And did you think you would be where you are today?
No, I really didn't. I thought I was going to end up being a general manager for a developer. And, I got really bored of that subject matter, like writing articles on the top 5 Melbourne cafes, blah, blah, blah. So my advice, wow, I definitely didn't think, I'm not saying I'm hugely successful, but if someone could have explained back then what I'm doing now, I would have been like, what? Wow. Really interesting and really different. And, I finally figured out my strengths, I guess, which weren't crunching numbers for marketing budgets, but more working on communications for change. But my advice to my younger self, oh my God, if I have to think about this, I guess would be to keep going. Like every year you look back on what you achieved last year and you just make a little dent and a little difference. And when I started my master's, I was like, this is going to take forever because I was working full time. Like it wasn't a 2-year thing. I had to do night school. And I was like, this is going to go on forever. This is going to get me nowhere. But you just keep chipping away at it and you're making progress in all of the smaller moments. So I guess I would just tell myself to like chill out a little bit. And, remind myself that I'm working towards it. And I used to have this thing up on my dresser when I was in my 20s and I was looking at changing what I did, and it was 3 words, you will find it. And I guess I'd remind myself that you will find it, whatever it is. It might be quitting your job and traveling. It might be starting a family. It might not be. That you will find it.
Yeah, I love that.
I don't know, Jen, I don't know if that's the answer. I don't know.
Yeah, no, that was a fantastic answer. I loved it, and I'm sure the audience will as well.
Okay.
All right, amazing. Well, it's been so great chatting with you. Always fun having a chat with you. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much, Jen. It's so good to be here. Really great conversation, and I'm looking forward to catching up.
Yeah, absolutely. Me too. See you later.
See ya.